Hi, it's Elisabeth Hancock, the host of the Great Awakening podcast. So this week, I thought that we could take a look at things like the Great Reset and the Rainbow Warriors. So we're coming to the end of a Great Reset now. We know that New World Order are talking about resets, and also linking this to astrology and things like the firmament and whether or not this is a simulation, because this is something that many of us are researching. And I think it also gives us a lot of positive things to look at over the next few years. So let's start by looking at wipeouts and resets. I'm going to be talking a lot about the Indigenous tribes as I go through this presentation, because I find their work really interesting because they've been here for such a long time. They literally can trace their lineage back up to 85,000 years ago. So they've seen it all. As we know, the Hopi Indians, they talk about us moving into the fifth world. The Mayans believe that we're moving into our seventh world. So what do they mean by this? And does this fit into what we are calling wipeout? So we can see all the way around our world, we can see that there's this old world that exists. There's evidence of many different civilizations that are existing underneath our current civilization. So is this what we are calling wipeouts and resets? The Indigenous tribes, they all talk about worlds beginning after catalytic events. And from my research, I would say that these were natural disasters, but they could also have been naturally created by someone or something. But it's essentially using some sort of advanced technology that we have either forgotten about, or it's an advanced civilization or race of people who are using it and keeping it away from us. These are all stories that come from my second book, which is Human Origins, the Multiverse, and Our Star Ancestry. And one of the stories that I talk about in there is a very interesting one. And actually, this comes from Freddie Silva, his book, The Missing Lands, which is a very interesting book if you're interested in these sorts of things. He talks a lot about the Indigenous people, and he's essentially been traveling around the world, interviewing the Indigenous people and finding out more about these stories, these legends, myths, prophecies, all these sorts of things. And one of the stories that the Wataha people said, and the Maoris are made up of three different lines, ancestral lines, and the Wataha people are one of those lines. And they say that they originate or stem from the Uraku, who are a very tall, white-skinned, red-haired, light-eyed type of person. And they used to help them when they had these catalytic events. They used to come and they used to help them. And these Wataha people, they passed on their knowledge to what they would call the wisdom keepers. So in each of these tribes, they each had a wisdom keeper, and these wisdom keepers were the ones that kept the oral stories going and kept the wisdom going. Whenever there were catalytic events, they would say a prayer, and this prayer would essentially stop things from happening. So it would stop comets from crashing into the earth. It would allow celestial objects, events happening in the sky to go on past and not affect the world. However, one year, the wisdom keeper said the prayer wrong. And this caused a comet to crash into the earth. And it resulted in such a dramatic upheaval that the earth flipped over, the planet flipped. So we know that this has happened, and the North and South Pole, they flip over. We can also see that this would cause a lot of upheaval for the earth and for the people living on it. So I always ask myself, why would they say the prayer wrong? When they've been saying it right for millennia, why would they suddenly say it wrong? And it seems to me that this was done purposefully. And I don't think that all of these things have necessarily been bad. I don't see myself as a victim and feel that all of this stuff is being done to me. I think that there's a wider play in there. I think it's more complex than we understand. And I think that there's also a spiritual element to all of this. Even quantum physicists are saying that the universe works in cycles and everything repeats itself. And we're going to be looking at the astrological zodiac cycles in a minute as well, but they also say the same thing. As we start to get towards the end of a period, an era, a cycle, the Indigenous people say that this is when we need to get back to nature and start to be kind and more loving to each other. As one cycle ends and another one begins. They're the same with the Indigenous people, with our religious texts, with our myths. They talk about these periods where the earth was wiped out and it started again. And we'll look at some melted buildings on the next slide so we can see, actual physical evidence of this. And this is one of the things that I've been thinking about is the Indigenous people, they talk about how we need to get back to being more spiritual, get back to nature, start being more kind and more loving. So is it that time starts again in a 3D linear expression? And certainly the religious texts, the Indigenous people, they do seem to, well, the Indian Vedas as well, they do seem to hint that the world is split into higher consciousness souls and lower consciousness souls. And is it the higher consciousness souls that move on to the next dimension and the lower consciousness souls stay in 3D until they learn to expand their vibration to that level? And which essentially we could see as waking up to the illusion. So I think for me, consciousness is all about expansion, not rising, although it rises as well because it rises in frequency, moving to a higher frequency, a more positive frequency. But moving from 3D to 5D for me is about expanding ourselves to that vibration. And I actually, from my research, I would say that space, what we call space, is actually in 5D. So as a 3D planet, we're not part of space, or what we would call the galaxy. So possibly moving from 3D to 5D is another way of saying becoming galactic. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot over the past few weeks. I don't think we need any more fear in the world. We need positivity and hope now. But equally, I'm not delusional. And I think that there needs to be a reality check in there as well. But I think that we all feel a huge positivity in the world at the moment. We can really feel these positive energies rising and rising. And there's something to be said for that, which is why I don't think we need to be fearful about the future. And again, we'll be talking about this as we go through this presentation. So interestingly, the Indigenous people, they all talk about coming from Atlantis and Lemuria, or what we call Mu. And this was their original homeland. When Atlantis began to sink, or when certain continents began to shift, they moved to Egypt, to South America, and they began their civilization again, so to speak. And here in these images, we can see this is an AI image of Atlantis and how Atlantis is described by the people that refer to Atlantis. And then down here, it's a 3-ring image that's been discovered in Morocco. And a lot of people are saying that this is the original Atlantean city. And certainly there may well be some truth to that. Who knows? So here we have the concept of resets. Again, these are coming from the Indigenous tribes, and they're talking about the end of each age or cycle. And the survivors of each reset, each age cycle, are essentially helped by advanced people, or what they would call gods. And interestingly, these gods seem to be linked to places like Sirius, Orion, Pleiades, Ursa Major, and possibly other places as well. But we can see here, so in Mesopotamia, you've got the Apkallu, and these are the helpers. They teach them agriculture, calendars, maths, sacred law, architecture, cosmology, writing, music. They essentially teach them civilization or culture all over again. We also can add the laws in there. For example, these laws, these money systems can be traced all the way back to Babylon, which is part of Mesopotamia. So we've also got India, we've got Mesoamerica, the Mayan Aztec with their Quetzalcoatl and their helpers, the different helpers that they have there. So these are people that they come in from the sea, and they come in boats, and it seems to be that they've come in from either parts of the world that have not been flooded, or what I suspect it may be is they're coming from parts of the world that are currently hidden to us. Again, I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. I just feel that this world is much bigger than we believe it is. And I think that there are possibly even continents that are hidden from us for whatever reason that may be. And as I believe that this world is multidimensional, it may be that these continents or other parts of the world are actually other dimensions and not necessarily something that we would necessarily see in this 3D realm that we're living in at the moment. So again, interestingly, a man and a woman repopulate the earth in every culture. And we have these creation stories, this repopulation coming up in all these different cultures: China, Greece, Norse, Maori, Japan. They literally are everywhere. That a man and a woman and certain helpers, they help to reset the world again, and they help to bring in civilization. And we can see here some images that we are being told that these are natural mountainous areas, but we can see that they're not. We can see buildings, windows, bricks. We can see all of this showing that indeed there has been some sort of catalytic event, and the indigenous tribes are correct. Here we can see more images, and these are credited to Viking Wizard 3.0 on TikTok. And they're very interesting images, which is why I've used them, because you can see how each of these mountain ranges actually looks very much like a building of some sort. And if we think about what the Grand Canyon looks like in America, we really can see that these natural formations are not natural formations, but instead they are wiped out buildings, and they've literally been turned to stone, turned to rock. And as unbelievable as it may sound, the more I've begun to research it, the more I can begin to see that this possibly is the case. Just look at the image down below where you have the gold buildings. And you can see on the right-hand side here that this is supposed to be some sort of natural rock formation, but is it instead some sort of old building? What is so interesting about Saudi Arabia and the Middle East is that it's the area where they have hundreds of doorways that go nowhere, just doorways in the rock. And I suspect in the case of the Middle East that most of them are actually melted buildings. So this could be natural, in fact. There could be some sort of explosions, under the earth explosions, plasma explosions, or it could be the use of direct energy weapons. And again, it just depends on how you look at it and where the research is leading us. I suspect it's a mixture of both. But of course, then the next question has to be, who is using direct energy weapons and why? And that's why there are so many people that believe that these resets have been done on purpose for malevolent reasons. So again, coming back to the indigenous tribes, because they really do have the most believable and interesting stories. And one of those stories is how they survived, because they were helped and they survived and they moved into the next earth. So why did that happen? How did it happen? And why them? And why not the other people in the world at that time? So we see here the Hopi, Zuni, Pueblo, Navajo, Cherokee tribes all talk of being taken under the earth and then brought back again when the earth had settled down. I've often thought, did they perhaps come back to an old world that was no longer inhabited by people? And they would say that they were taken under the earth and they would stay there, possibly for a very long time, until it was safe to come back. So the Hopi can trace their ancestral line back 70, 80,000 years. And these are the ones that say that the ant people helped them during the First and Second World destructions. They took them underground, and they described these ant people in a similar way to what we would call a grey. They describe them as humanoid in shape, but with distinctive heads, large or round, with maybe elongated skulls, with dark or large eyes. They had antenna-like structures on their head, and this could have been part of their anatomy, physiology, Or maybe even if it was some sort of helmet that had these sort of sensors coming off the helmet in some way. They were described as having thin limbs, and they were often depicted with 6 fingers or 3 fingers, which is a trait sometimes attributed to beings in ancient rock art and star lore worldwide as well. No skin color was actually shown or referred to, but when they would draw them, they would depict them with earthy red tones, as we can see on the cave art on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can see the antenna coming up, you can see their big eyes. There are many people that say that these are metaphoric images in some way, and maybe they are. And they could also be mind sight images, so visionary images of the mind that allows us to see multidimensional or interdimensional or transdimensional beings that we are not able to see in this physical realm, but we're able to see them using our mind sight. And this would account for this sort of wavy energy sort of look to them, as if they're not really real or physical. They're more sort of imaginary, using the mind sight instead. But one thing that they all do say is that whoever these beings were, they were benevolent, and they helped them to survive, providing food, shelter, and fire until it was safe for them to return to the surface. And then they did return to the surface. They started all over again. And then we've got other accounts from other indigenous tribes who say that they went into the sky instead. So we've got the Dogon tribe, the Maori or Wataha, the Hawaiian, Polynesians, Inca, Peru. We've got the Dogon tribe who say that they were visited by these Nomo or Numu people from Sirius, who arrived originally in a spinning arc. Now, these beings were also said to be able to come and go from heaven to earth, so this is the sky. And many of the elders say that some of the Dogon ancestors were taken into the sky during these times of purification. So these wipeout, these resets are often referred to as a time of purification. The earth is cleansing herself. The religious accounts talk about this. We have in Noah's Ark that this global flood was used to wipe out certain races. In the Bible, we've got the Nephilim, we've got the wipeout depraved people, I suppose we'd call them. The Indian Vedas would probably call this the higher consciousness people are the ones who were rescued, and the lower conscious people are the ones who weren't. So the Maori and Wataha people speak of the Waka of light, the light ships that took people into the heavens after the floods. And again, they also talk about the pure of heart were the ones that were taken aboard. If we think of our species being a hybrid species itself of around 12 different races, 12 different species, and possibly thinking about some of these species being more warring. And certainly when we think about reptilian energy, and the ancient texts, they talk a lot about reptilians, and the reptilians being the original people of this planet. And if we think about human hybrids, reptilian human hybrids, possibly this would be a more warring race of people, lacking the empathy and compassion that the other races would have. And certainly I find it interesting to note that what used to be 5% of the population was psychopathic is now 10% of the population. So that is a growing area. Why is that? Does it mean that there are more reptilian human hybrids? Well, who knows? We've also got the archons as talked about in the Nag Hammadi text. And again, does that mean that more people have become exposed to this archon energy and their vibration pulled down because of it? Again, possibly, who knows? But certainly there is some sort of interference on this planet or realm, whatever it may be. It's what, many people call the devil, Satan, archons, Anunnaki, reptilians, whatever it may be. There's some sort of interference in some way where some races are able to interfere with other races using energy, an energetic aspect of our world or spiritual aspect of our world, something that is invisible to us, something that we cannot see, but it's there and it's making a difference. And possibly this is what it brings many people down to this, what the Indian Vedas call lower consciousness being. So again, we've got the Hawaiian Polynesians, they speak of Mu and the ancestors being taken into the sky or vanishing in star canoes before Mu sank. And their ancestors then went on to become the gods or the stars, and they literally returned to the heavens. So what does that mean? Does that mean that they returned back to the sky? Now, in the top right-hand image, you can see here, we've got what is probably what we call UFOs today. These are probably plasma ships, and you can see how they look like tiny little round orbs. So is that what our ancestors are describing? That these plasma ships would then return back to the sky and they would look like stars for them? Is that what that image is below on the bottom right-hand corner? That there is a man, a red-headed, sort of red-skinned, golden-skinned man who is in a star, literally. And where is he going in that star? And is that the gods? Because the gods are so often described as white-skinned, red hair, light eyes. I suspect when they are referring to white skin, they're actually referring to a luminosity, because the shining ones, the helpers of Horus, the Mesopotamian helpers, they're called shining ones, and we'll come back to that in a minute as well. So we've got the Inca, their gods return to the stars in fiery chariot. So we can see again, that looks like a fiery chariot, that one on the bottom right-hand side. And interestingly, we've also got ancient scrolls in Tibet that say that the waves of this great flood reached 3 miles high as the Himalayas. So where would the person have to be able to describe this? They would have to be above these waves, which means that they're possibly in the sky of some sort. And we've also got ocean tales as well. People also manage to survive by going under the sea. Again, we've got the Dogon tribe, because the Nomo who came to visit them or have been to visit them many, many times, who come from Sirius B, they were said to be an amphibious race, and they were able to live in the ocean or on land. And if they were on land, they would have to keep their skin moist. And they used to live a lot in caves, but they also would be happy under the water as well. And this is why Sirius B is often referred to as being a water planet. Some of these Dogon tribes say that the first teachings came from underwater cities or ships. Again, we've got that same link of boats, that the helpers, they come in boats from other parts of the world, possibly hidden parts of the world that we don't know about. And that's possibly because they are in another dimension to us. I don't see Earth as a 3D realm. I see it as a multidimensional realm. And certainly some of the older texts, I believe the Indian Vedas talk about this. They talk about certain buildings that are only seen in the Golden Age. We could see the Golden Age as being 5D. So these buildings are only available to be seen in this higher age, this raised consciousness, higher consciousness age. And there are islands as well that are only seen at certain times. An island off the coast of Ireland, which is only seen every 7 years. Not now, but this is from our myths and legends. And I do think that now we have a veil of illusion, a veil over many things that we believe are myth and legend, but many things that used to happen in our past. And to a certain extent, we have been programmed to only see a very small part of our multidimensional world now. So these helpers of humanity that came during these cataclysmic events, they came from, as I said, across the ocean or in boats, but many of these boats have been also described as sky boats, because some of them were described as being metal. So again, this is very interesting. They would go off in these sky boats and they would literally come back up to 1,000 years later. And interestingly, for them, it was only a couple of months, but when they came back, hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years had gone. And again, it makes me think, did they return back to these old world buildings, these buildings that just look so Atlantean, Lemurian, Roman, Greek, that sort of same look? Did they come back and we started to re-inhabit the earth and take on these buildings as our own? Because I've often wondered about that. What would you come back to if you came back 1,000 years later? Would you come back to a completely destroyed world, or would you come back to some of these amazing buildings, these pyramids, temples, these sacred structures that literally span the entire globe? The Hawaiian and Polynesian legends also speak of these gods as being sea travelers, sea navigators, and living under the sea. And they describe them as living in glowing cities that vanish into the waves. So what could that be exactly? What are these glowing cities that vanish into the waves? And I suppose it depends on the context of how this is used, because you can see in the middle image here, this is supposed to be one of these old cities that has been found under the earth. And it is very hard these days to tell what is a photoshopped image, what is an AI image, and what's actually a real image. Certainly those two swimmers have just been added onto this imagery, and there's definitely an AI sort of look about this image itself. But I do know that there have been cities that have been discovered under the waves. So is that what they are describing there, that they're vanishing into the waves? And what do they mean by glowing cities? There are some contactees who have talked about being taken to underwater cities. So we've got the Bermuda Triangle, and here, this bottom image on the right. This, again, this is an AI image depicting what our future underwater cities will look like. And I always, again, I get red flags when people talk about this. Why would our underwater cities look like that? And why would we have underwater cities? As I talked about in my Tataria conference, I don't think any of this stuff is new. There is nothing new under the sun. So if they're talking about creating underwater cities now, it means that there were probably underwater cities before. And we also have the Mamiwata people, who are said to live under the sea in the Caribbean. And these are said to abduct people and take them down into their underwater city, where they become part of a breeding program. Now, this doesn't sound particularly nice. It seems to go against free will. So I think maybe we have to look at this story from another angle, because I never think it's very healthy for us to see ourselves as victims. I think that we need to remember that we are sovereign, and sometimes we need to be intentional about our sovereignty, and we need to claim back our power more. So I'm not saying that abductions don't happen, and I'm not saying that people don't have bad things happen to them, but I do think that there are multiple levels to everything, and not everything is as we see it is, not everything is as we believe it is, and different things need exploring before we accept that something has been done to us. I also teach intuitive development, and we often do meditations within the group. And one of the things that I've really begun to discover more and more is that we can clear everything from our energy field, our physical body, which is an energy field. We can clear everything. And in fact, when we set the intention, and we set the intention to clear things, whether it's heavy metals from the chemtrails, whether it's wiring from the spiritual AI that we're all being sort of hooked up to, whatever it may be, we can clear all of this. And that's why I can see that things are being done to us, but we have more power than we believe we do. And this is something that I'm going to keep coming back to throughout this presentation, because I think it's fundamental. There is so much happening in this world at the moment, and there's so much happening on a spiritual, energetic level that many of us are just not aware of. And returning back to that level, I think, will help many of us moving forward through these turbulent times. We also, in the top right image, we have these amphibian beings that were discovered in Lake Baikal in Russia. This is the oldest and deepest lake in the world. And the story is that there were the Navy from Russia who were doing some training exercises in this lake. And as they dived down, they stumbled across these 10-foot tall amphibian beings that you can see here that had these sort of caps on their head. Now, again, this is an AI generated image, but it is an image that is based on the description that was given. The reason that we know about this story is because the information from the Cold War has now been released. So there are certain stories that are coming to light. And many of these trainees, these young recruits, actually died because these amphibian beings, they created this sonar field so that they would not be hurt or harmed because these trainees were trying to capture them. So they created this sonar field around them, which affected the trainees. It pushed them very fast up to the top of the water, so fast that they actually suffered from the bends, and some of them died. As we know, we can die from this. So they were not intentionally trying to hurt them, but they had a grasp of this sonar technology in a way that we don't have that understanding yet. Again, showing this advanced technology, showing that there are beings living under the sea who possess advanced technology, and in my opinion, most likely come from the old world before we were stapled into 3D, one-dimensional, linear thinking and being. Another story which comes from my book, and again, this comes from Freddie Silver's The Missing Lands book, is that so many giant skeletons have been found on every single continent. I mean, thousands and thousands. So we know that there was a race of giant people going all the way up to like 36 feet, which is just incredible when you think about it. But there have been so many remains that we cannot ignore this anymore. And we have to accept that there were giant people living on this planet before us, and maybe alongside us as well. And on the island of Tongariro in 1967, a full skeleton that measured 22 feet was found. And interestingly, underneath the skeletal remains, the archaeologists found these urns, and they tried to take these urns from this grave. And they then heard this loud, booming voice coming from a nearby lagoon, telling them to put the urns back. They reburied them and then ran away. But this is so fascinating because not only does it tell us that we're being watched, and there are certainly many texts and ancient talks of the watchers, people watching us, which I find fascinating. But it's also telling us that they're watching and they're not allowing us to do some things. So they're not allowing us to take these urns. So what maybe is in these urns? Well, possibly some sort of ancient artifact that we are not allowed to have yet. And that's because we are not at a high enough consciousness level in order to be able to not abuse these ancient artifacts. From my meditations and channelings, which I do because I want to try and access more information, I would say that there are hundreds of ancient artifacts on Earth. And I would say that some of these artifacts go back billions of years. And again, it's sort of showing us that there are different civilizations. Some of these artifacts feel very off-planet to me. And another story that I also talk about in my book is to do with these secret societies. And there are many secret societies who are actually forming part of the positive energy on this planet at the moment. And, we could call this white hat energy. But, again, this word has been so interfered with and played around with that it's triggering a lot of people. I can see that. So I'll just call it a positive consciousness or a growing positive energy that we have on the planet. So one of these groups, they are apparently helping the dragon families. And the reason that they are helping the dragon families is because they originated from Earth. So they were one of these lost civilizations, these ancient civilizations. And possibly they left Earth during one of these catalytic events, and possibly they left in the sky, as we talked about previously, and they went to other dimensions. Maybe they walked through portals to other dimensions. Maybe they went through the ocean to other dimensions. Maybe they went through the mountains to other dimensions, because we know that the mountains in Tibet, those of a higher consciousness, can actually use those mountains to reach the higher realms. And those of a lower consciousness essentially end up in China. So they talk about coming back to Earth in order to help stamp out this evil, this growing evil on this planet. And when I read this story, it really made me think, well, first of all, who are they that they were here on this planet? And they talk about being here thousands, if not millions of years ago, because they're now a highly evolved species, race of beings. So possibly they were here billions of years ago. They've now evolved. They've moved to higher dimensions. they've now evolved technologically as well as spiritually, because I understand from my research that we cannot evolve technologically without spiritually, that we need to grow spiritually in order to ascend, essentially. And ascend is, I think, move to a higher dimension, higher density, however we want to look at it. So these beings have essentially come back to help because they say that Earth is where they come from. So what does that mean? And I'm wondering if this is how levels of consciousness work, in that we reach higher levels of consciousness, and if you like, we are able to expand further into the energy field, and we expand further into being a creator being, because we are all creator beings. We are essentially manifesting this reality into being already. We just probably don't know it, but this is what the Indian Vedas talk about with manifestation. So we know that manifestation is true. In my first book, I studied the science behind spirituality, and there's a lot of quantum physics, string theory, quantum entanglement behind manifestation. So we know that manifestation is real. And what is manifestation? It's creation. It's creating. So essentially, we would then become creator beings who are able to manifest. At the moment, we're manifesting our own reality. But if we get to a high enough level, then possibly we will be able to manifest entire worlds. And I wonder if maybe this race of beings who come back to help stamp out this evil, they are now at a very high level and have moved into creation on a universal, multiversal level. So possibly moving from 3D to 5D is a way of saying, at the moment, 3D is planetary creation, but maybe 5D is galactic creation. And so I do sometimes wonder about what we call ETs and what these sort of beings are. I know David Bohm talks about how they are real, but they are at a deeper level of existence to where we are now. And I think that that's probably right, that they are at a deeper level of existence. But anyway, these very advanced race of beings have come back to Earth. They're helping the dragon family stamp out this evil that we know exists here, because they want to help the planet, because they feel a connection to planet Earth, because they were here as well. So they obviously were not wiped out, which again seems to back up this same theory that higher consciousness beings or people are not wiped out, but lower consciousness ones are. So we've talked a lot about these different eras and worlds, and something that science is beginning to show as well, and I always have to be careful of scientific theories, and I question everything, literally, because we never know what is a program, what are we being herded into, and what is my thought? What is someone else's thought? What's my thought? What is a CIA program or a BBC program, whatever it may be, and what is truth? And I've understood that we all have a different truth, which is probably why we're all arguing so much about these different truths. But we all resonate at the frequency of truth. So we all know truth. And when we think about the ancient texts, we can see here all these different ancient texts, religious texts, they all talk about this firmament. So we can see the Bible, God creates a firmament. We've got in Egypt, the sky goddess arching over the earth, forming a dome. We've got Islam, the universe has 7 heavens, each a solid layer. The Hindu is the universe is layered in realms or lokas. Norse is multiple realms with Asgard above, and that's the home of the gods. We've got the Hopi tribe again, that there's a sky vault that must be pierced to reach higher worlds. And to reach higher worlds, we know from the Indian Vedas that we need to be of a higher consciousness level. We've got in China, heaven is a dome covering a flat earth. And then we've got the Polynesians, the firmament is a hard shell-like dome through which the gods can pass. And here we have the picture of the firmament. This is an image taken from the, I think, 14th century, and it's depicting the firmament. So we can see we have the earth inside with the planets and the stars and the moon, the sun hanging off the firmament. And then on the outside, we've got sort of, like clockwork, like, like it's not real, like it's a simulation. So is this firmament a simulation? And how does astrology fit into this? This is something I've been thinking about for a long time, because astrology is very interesting. How does it work exactly? How do planets do this? And why do they keep coming back? Why is it cyclical? Now, we say it's because we're in a small place in the solar system, revolving around the sun, and therefore we keep seeing the universe, the same parts of the universe. But I don't think that that's the case. And I think it's the astrological charts that make me believe that, because these astrological zodiac charts exist in so many different cultures, showing us that this is important for our ancestors. But why is this? How can the position of a planet describe what your personality is? How come the time that you are born describe what your life path is, what you're going to be doing in your life? And I think this is why so many people have turned away from astrology now, because it doesn't make any logical sense. When you use the ego, the analytical mind, your logic to try and understand how can what is up in the sky determine what your life is going to be, what your levels of success are, and what your personality is. Well, it just sounds laughable, doesn't it? So we know that there must be a reason for that. It must be part of the simulation. It must be part of what we decided to incarnate to do. So what if our astrology chart was the personality and the path that we chose to experience in this life? And in the next life, we choose to incarnate into a different time of birth, so therefore astrological chart, so we can have a different experience and personality. And is this what the simulation is? So what we're seeing in the stars up above is part of the firmament. This is what we could call the Garden of Eden simulation, a bit like these virtual reality games that we're all playing. That this is a simulation that we're incarnating into. This explains the cycles of time, the different eras, how we've now just come out of the Pisces, we're moving into the Aquarius, and these are the cycles of time. So if we are beings of light, which quantum physics is showing that we are not physical, we're made of energy or light, then how do beings of light have personalities? And I often ask myself this, how can a being of light have a personality? And because I also do past life regression therapy and I work as an energy healer on people and on myself as well, I can see that the more healing we do, the more our personality changes, which means that our personality is not fixed. So it's not our personality. If you like, it's our wounds. It's what we've chosen to incarnate as. The Hopi and the Cree tribe believe that we manifested ourselves into being, that we started out as light and then we manifested ourselves into physical form, which is sort of what the Indian Vedas are indicating as well. So many different cultures talk about these luminous people. We've got in the book of Adam and Eve, they talk of this couple or these couples walking out of Gar Sag into the valley below and becoming less luminous as they went. Now, this could be metaphorical, as in they're moving into lower consciousness levels, but it can also be that they're moving into more physical reality. They're becoming more dense. Their energy is becoming lower frequency energy, so it can be seen, because that's essentially what physical reality is. It's low enough frequencies of energy so that we can see them. And the higher frequencies of energy we cannot see. I don't think lower energy is equivalent to lower consciousness myself, but it's interesting that these couples were vibrating at a higher frequency and therefore were more luminous. And then they moved into a lower frequency. And we can maybe think then this is what the Hopi and the Cree tribe, when they say we manifested ourselves into physical form, that we started out luminous and light and manifested ourselves into physical form. So what would that make us? Beings of light, but also possibly angels. And we can see here the different Indigenous people, the different tribes, and what they say about astrology. So we've got the Vedic astrology, and this uses the zodiac and lunar mansions. It's karma orientated and very spiritual. We've got Chinese astrology. This is the 12-year lunar cycle, and each of our souls incarnate across these different 12-year lunar cycles, and also the 5 elements, as we know, from wood, metal, earth, air, etc. We've got the Mayan astrology, and this uses a sacred calendar combining cosmic and earthly forces. Western astrology, which is influenced by the precession of the equinoxes, and also Greek esotericism. Egyptian, Babylonian, Incan, Druids, Aborigines, African, they all had star law guiding prophecy and soul purpose. So not necessarily using the same zodiac calendars, but using this same guiding of the stars. And we can see the different constellations, Aries, Taurus, Gemini on the right-hand side, and they would map the stars, and each person would incarnate at that particular star map, which would become their sole purpose. It's what they came here to do. We've got the Hopi, the Dogon, the Aborigines. They were not necessarily using astrology in the sense that we use it, but again, they would all be aligning to different celestial events, Orion, Pleiades, Venus, and they believe that the souls came from these star clusters before entering into Earth, and Earth can be seen as the physical planet where we come to experience physical life, and also learning through our experiences. We've got the Aborigines, that they link this to constellations as well, to lunar rhythms. Again, the Pleiades, they believe that their ancestors came from the Pleiades. The Dogon tribe, as we know, their ancestors came from Sirius B. They're all using celestial events, planetary alignments to guide them in each of their lifetimes. And again, this seems again to me to be a simulation to allow spirits or beings of light to experience a physical reality. So what is the Great Reset? Because we only have to look at the World Economic Forum's website to see that part of their New World Order is the Great Reset. They actually call it that. So why would they call it the Great Reset? Considering what the Indigenous people say and what we see around us. Why would they use that term when the Indigenous people would talk about the world resetting itself, that certain civilizations are wiped out? I don't see myself as a victim here, but I do think that it's been hijacked and our human consciousness has been herded by something else. So what do the World Economic Forum know about past resets on Earth? Do they know that there have been resets? Yes, I would say that they do know this, either from reading ancient texts or because they've been around for a very, very, very long time. And interestingly, the Rothschilds are part of the Lurie family ancestral line, which is the oldest family tree in the world, said to be even older than the Indigenous people. So the Indigenous people can trace their family line back, or their lineage, 85,000 years. So who are the Lurie family? We only have to look at the old world architecture to see that this old world is being destroyed. And we can see that these buildings were not built in the 1800s. There is no way that all of these buildings across the globe could have all been built in the 1800s. It's just not possible. So if the Lurie family have been here for as long as the Indigenous tribes, but are possibly a family that have come from another dimension and are more advanced technologically, but not spiritually, which is why they are not able to ascend. So in a sense, possibly they have been part of these simulations again and again and again. And what they are able to do is once the world has reset, they are able to appear again, appear as gods maybe, appear as advanced people, advanced technological people, whatever it may be. And are these maybe the Anunnaki people? Are these the people that so many researchers refer to as the Anunnaki, that they came here from another dimension 200,000 years ago? Did they come here from another world, another dimension, another sphere? And if so, are they steering all of this? Are they guiding all of this? Are these the the self-proclaimed gods? Well, I really don't know. I'm just throwing it out there as a maybe. Are they doing the resets or is something else? In all honesty, I believe that there are multiple levels of this. It's not as straightforward as we see. It's not a case of evil people wiping out the rest of the population using direct energy weapons. And I really feel that whoever these people are, maybe they are reptilian hybrids, maybe they are Dracos who've come in through the mind control of this planet, because I do think that there's an element to the galaxy or galactic energy, if you like, which is technological. I don't see space as being out there or the galaxy as being out there. I feel like it's all in here, inside us, inside the earth, whatever it may be, multidimensional realms, which our brain is set up to access multidimensional realms. So if we accept that the multidimensional realms exist in our own mind, we access them with our mind. They're not places to go, they're states of being. So if we're accessing them with our mind, it means that there are other levels of reality where certain things are playing out, and we are not able to see those, but we can feel them. And that's why we can feel many things shifting and changing now. We can't see it around us, but we can feel it. We can see the chemtrails, we can see the heavy metals, we can see the technology, we can see the transgender, we can see social media, we can see all of this stuff being inverted, the political mess that we see. But feeling, if we go into our heart and feel, we can feel that there's a positive energy growing. So are the resets over? And interestingly, many of the Indigenous people do say that this is the last reset. But they also say that it can go in either direction and it depends on us. And we can see the list here of all the different aspects of our world where it is indicating that the resets are over. So we've got the end of the Mayan calendar cycle in 2012, as we know. We're moving into this astrological age of Aquarius. We've got this earth consciousness and awakening of feminine energy, which we can see the patriarchal energy blocked that for a considerable amount of time. We've got that coming back. We've got this veil beginning to thin now as the worlds start to come together again. We've got this collapsing of dimensions as everything starts to collapse into one. We've got the timeline theory that all timelines now have been collapsed into one timeline. We've also got this concept of the rainbow warriors, and this comes from the Hopi Indians, which I'll come back to on the next page. And they talk about how these rainbow warriors are coming in. They come in at the end of the reset. And in this particular reset, they're going to take it to a new world, a better world. So it's indicating that we're not going to be wiped out and reset again, as we can see happened in the past. We've also got Satan's little season. There are many researchers talking about this. 250 years of Satan's little season, where there is just chaos and illusion. And it's supposed to be all to do with inversion. So everything that you see doesn't make sense. And certainly when you look around, you see that that is absolutely true. Nothing makes sense. So does this mean we're heading back into the millennium reign of Christ? Maybe, because there are many people talking about the return of Christ. It's not a return of a person, it's return of Christ consciousness. The Satan's little season is due to end 2026, 2030, depending on when it first started, and different researchers have different theories. But again, we can see that the World Economic Forum, New World Order, is due to come in at 2030. So it makes sort of sense that 2030 is the end, the beginning of the Christ consciousness coming back. We often see this Great Reset as something bad because we can see that Klaus Schwab was talking about just insane things. His sidekick, Harari, was talking about even more insane things that obviously, were complete psychopaths. But we have to ask then, what is the Great Reset? Why did they call it that? And why was it supposed to come in, or is it supposed to come in 2030? And is it that it can go either way? And certainly the Indigenous tribes say it can go either way. They say it's up to us. And this is where the concept of human consciousness again is coming in, because I don't think that anything has power over us. I really believe that our human consciousness is creating this world. Planetary consciousness, 3D consciousness, planetary consciousness, creating this world. And it's our human consciousness that is guiding this Great Reset, not theirs. but they are herding our human consciousness. And that's how they've managed to create such chaos, such mayhem. They've been herding us through the TV, through mind control, CIA programming, through HARP technology, through chemtrails. They've been herding us for a very long time, since at least the 1940s, probably since the 1800s, in fact. It's us. We are the creator beings, not them. We are the ones creating this realm, not them. So all they can do is herd our human consciousness to create a world that they want. And this is very, very positive. So they are pushing this agenda, the new reset, with negative energy. And we can see this, all this transgender stuff, with all this inversion, all this political mess. You know, you can't even talk about white skin without someone calling you a racist. I mean, where have we gone with this? I'm not allowed to talk about my own skin color because I'm a racist. This is just insane. You can see how this is just a mass inversion of the truth. And that's exactly what they wanted to happen. So they are driving it with negative energy, with all of their transhumanism stuff. We are driving it with positive energy. And we can feel the growth of this positive energy. And this is what I call white hats in my book. But after using that term last time, it triggered many people. So I won't talk about white hats as being people. I'll talk about white hats as essentially being not black hats. So white hats is anyone that's not a black hat. So white hats can be seen as anyone who has got positive energy, who has got positive intention. And we are the ones doing this. Nothing is saving us. We don't need saving because we are creating this reality already. It's just that something is siphoning off our consciousness, our energy source, and using it to create their reality, which is their negative agenda. So we just need to drive this in a new direction. And this is why I've used this image here, which is an image of us turning our back. Because when I meditate around this, I see like billions of people all just turning their back on these whatever we call them, psychopaths, reptilian hybrids, whatever it is we call them, archons, negative people, clones, whatever they may be. We literally turn our back on them. We are no longer giving them our energy. We are no longer looking at them. We are observing them into reality, literally, as quantum physics shows us. So we stop looking at them, they disappear. They no longer have our energy source. They can no longer control our world and create our world using our human consciousness. And we don't even need to do this physically, because there is an energetic, or what we call spiritual, but there is an energetic level to this world. And we know that again from quantum physics, showing that it's all energy, it's all frequency, it's not physical. So we can make changes on an energetic level. We can energetically say, we're not going to play your game anymore. We're going to shut them off. We're going to cut the cords. Stop looking at them, stop giving them our energy, stop believing them, stop watching their programs. Or if we do watch their programs, have huge amounts of discernment and understand that it's a program. And once we can see through their illusion, they cannot touch us anymore. So this is about collective energy. And that's the most fundamental part of this. The more of us that do this, the faster it will change. And as I said, the rainbow prophecy, I think that this is hugely inspirational, motivational for people, whatever your thoughts are about this. Again, these indigenous tribes, they seem to understand about these simulations. They seem to understand about these resets, these wipeouts. They've been part of them. They've gone up in the sky. They've gone under the ocean. They've gone under the ground. They've been part of them. Then they've come back to reseed the world afterwards. They talk about being helped by the gods, by star beings. They're always talking about star people, star beings. These star beings that come and help them at these periods, these reset, these wipeout periods. And then they return to the stars. And they seem to go back in either their fiery chariots, which we could see as a sort of a rocket, if you like, or as stars themselves, which we could see as plasma craft. And the Hopi, the Cherokee, the Cree, the Lakota tribes, they're all talking about this rainbow prophecy where the rainbow warriors will come and they will heal the earth, restore balance between humanity and nature, reawaken ancient knowledge, reunify people of all races and beliefs under spiritual truth, not religious dogma. And these rainbow warriors, they are said to be people of all races, nations, and ages. It's got nothing to do with skin color, nothing to do with culture, nothing to do with anything. It's to do with consciousness. And the Indian Vedas, as you know from my Tartaria conference presentation, the Indian Vedas split the world in terms of higher consciousness and lower consciousness. They didn't split it in terms of white people, black people, red people, yellow people. They didn't do that. They split the world in terms of higher consciousness people and lower conscious people. And that is how I look at the world as well. Although I don't believe that any of us are lower consciousness people, I believe that many of us have been trapped into that using mind control technology. I think that we all have the potential to be higher conscious people, but we have to wake up. We have to have discernment. We have to see what's going on around us. And we have to step back into our sovereignty and start saying, I do not consent, and turn our backs on these silly games, agendas, whatever they may be. Understanding that politics is just one massive game. You only had to look at the politicians in the House of Lords in the UK to see them all laughing their heads off. They don't take any of it seriously, which means that we probably shouldn't as well. They know something that we don't. The political sphere in the US, it's just a massive smear campaign continuously. This is not higher consciousness at all. So therefore, we should not listen to them. We should not take any notice of them. And the more they smear each other and the more they act like lower conscious people, the more we understand that these are not our tribe. They are not higher conscious people. Therefore, they are not people that we should be spending our time with or quantum entangling with, essentially. We turn our backs on their games and we start to adopt natural law, which I talked about in a previous presentation. Natural law splits into 4 different categories: education, facilities, peacekeeping, and also the law courts. And they use the stannary court system. Natural law is the original law, and it is a law that is legal, and it's one that we can bring back in now. We can literally bring it back in. The gypsies have been using it for centuries, and that's why the police can't touch them. So we can start doing that now. We can get together in communities. We can start creating this new earth, these new communities. If you resonate with the term starseed, light worker, indigo child, rainbow child, whatever it may be, then possibly you have actually come here to do this. So the Rainbow Warrior prophecy, it talks about how the people from the Golden Age, Lemuria, Atlantis, Tartaria, the old world, whatever we want to see as the Golden Age, the people of the Golden Age have essentially reincarnated in order to bring back those memories, to bring back that DNA, to bring back that higher vibration, to bring back that wisdom from the Golden Age. This Rainbow Warrior prophecy is said to activate at the end of the darkest age, just before the dawn of a new Golden Age. We can feel this positive energy rising. When I meditate, I see this image. I just get goosebumps whenever I see it, because I think it's so simple. We just have to cut off their energy source. And because we are their energy source, we just have to turn our backs on them. And they're no longer existing in our world. We are creating this reality. We're creating everything. We turn our backs on their games and we create a new reality. And the more I think that we club together, we get back into communities, we start to work together, we stop fighting amongst ourselves, and we use our huge amounts of energy to create this new earth, this rainbow prophecy. We start to make that happen. And I'll end with that and this powerful image of us all, 7 billion people, turning our backs on the corrupt parasites, parasitic elites, whatever we want to call them, the political systems, even the banking, the financial systems. We turn our back on all of it because we never created this. This is not ours. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed today. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Take care for now, and I'll catch up with you next week. All right, bye.